weeks ago, I don't know how many people in here watch 60 Minutes. I don't, but I got a link to it. Did you see the one about active shooter?
No, this has
Yeah, this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. You can go on the website and find it. Or you can contact me. I think I've got a link to it. But they had the public safety director, I believe, in New York City, and he was saying the same thing as what most police are saying now, or most police departments are beginning to say, is the first person on the scene needs to go in and make contact with the guy. In the past, they have waited until they got their forces together and everybody goes in together. Does anybody have any clue how long they waited in Columbine?
30
Forever.
45. 45 minutes before they went in to get this guy. And now they're saying whoever gets on the scene needs to go in and start trying to clear the place out. And one of the things that they've had to do is they've had to train these police to, if you run up to somebody in the hallway that's laying there bleeding, you have to leave that person there. Your first instinct is to stop and help them. But you have to learn to overcome that. Leave those people laying there and go get the guy so that there won't be more people laying there.
Right. Stop the source.
And one of the statistics that they had, and also one of the chiefs of police that was talking for this, was the chief of police of Washington, D.C. She said, when you're involved in an active shooter, there's 3 things you need to do, an active shooting situation. You need to get out of there, if at all possible. If not, you need to hide. And if not, figure out how to take him out. And she said that's totally different from the way most police departments have been thinking about it, but that's what they're coming to. I was in a meeting this week at the Bar Association where the chief of police of Marietta stood up and said that's exactly what they're doing. One of the statistics that he mentioned is that in the average active shooter situation, there are 14 people killed before the police arrive. If there's an armed citizen in there, what do you think the number is?
2.9.
4. That's what he gave. It's close though. But he said the average was 4 people. And then one of the things that brought up, which I mention occasionally, is in this meeting, one of the moms that demand action all the time said, well, if there's somebody in there that's going to stop that, then most of the time that's a off-duty policeman. And the guy said, yeah, it is. Well, my statement to that is, we're in gun-free zones. Who's going to have a gun besides an off-duty policeman? I say get rid of all the damn gun-free zones in the country, and it'll be a whole lot safer country. Amen. That's just my opinion. But if you get a chance, really try to look up that 60 Minutes program. I was extremely surprised and shocked to see it.
Sir,
Yes, sir.
the guy over here said he was in a situation where a guy's up in a balcony. Even if you take your gun and fire in the air, you might distract him enough to, and then get.
And I have made that same statement before.
Yeah, you know.
My feeling is if you're in a lot of these places and something's going on, you don't really have to shoot at anybody, shoot at the ceiling.
Yeah.
Because when they hear gunfire, they're going to, a lot of them, not all of them, but an awful lot of people, when they hear gunfire, they're leaving. How many times have you seen where somebody breaks into a house and somebody shoots? When the gun goes off, they don't stop and say, was that a 22? They go, I'm out of here. There was a good video on the internet just last week or so of a lady, I believe she was in California, but it was a 65-year-old grandmother who owned a jewelry store.
Yeah.
See that? And like five guys come in to rob the jewelry store.
There was assholes and elbows at the door.
Yeah.
They all hit the door at the same time.
It
And there were 4 of them, they couldn't get out. They had to reorganize and stack up so they
It
could
looked
get out
like
the
the
door.
Keystone Cop
Yes,
trying to
it
get out
did.
that door. I mean, it was amazing. But they all walked in, nice and polite, you know, they gathered to where they wanted to get their goods. She was sitting behind this little window and saw what was going on. She grabbed her gun. And she's going out for him, and it kind of reminded me a lot of Tim Conway, if you ever saw him on the Here she comes down here like this. These guys are coming. So I do believe that a lot of times that's the resistance they need is to know that there's a gun in there. And I believe if they know that they're in not in a gun-free zone, they're not as likely to pick that target. But that's just my opinion. We just had a meeting last week with some of the legislators to discuss what we are trying to go for this year.
Concealed carry.
We already have concealed carry.
Constitutional carry.
Well, I have said this before and I'll say it again. If you show me a constitutional carry bill, I will support it. We have not introduced a constitutional carry bill in the state of Georgia. We have introduced bills that allow permitless carry. It gives you no other place to carry. The only place that I know of that has constitutional carry or close to it is Vermont.
For us now, what is constitutional carry?
Well, to me, constitutional carry says just what the Constitution says. You can carry it anywhere you want to.
Even in gun-free
But
zones.
what people are calling constitutional carry in these other states are permitless carry. You don't have to have a permit to carry either openly or concealed. But to me, that gives you nothing except $7 a year. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Georgia Carry has pushed for removing the license for carrying openly a pistol every session since Georgia Carry existed and has been unsuccessful in doing so. So to think just because a group comes out and demands that we're going to do it for not just open carry but concealed as well, when you can't even get the interim step, I think it's wasted energy. Put your energy into getting permitless carry for openly carried pistols, like the majority of states in the U.S. It's more than 30 states.
It's 30. It's
have
right now, it's 30.
no
Be 30.
license.
No, it's 30.
No license required to carry openly. Georgia's in the minority of states on that issue. And if you can't get that, if you can't get that first step, then you're wasting a lot of energy trying to get 2 steps in the same session.
And if you look at what the license has done for us, and you may laugh about that because you got to have a license to do it. But almost every place that we've opened up to carry that was not there in 2007. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard me say this. I know some of you have, but in 2007, when Georgia Carry first started, where did Georgia Carry? For all those that don't know, Ed Stone was our first president, and without Ed Stone, there probably wouldn't be a Georgia Carry. But where were we ranked nationally on
If you
restricted firearms?
don't include Illinois, which didn't allow carry anywhere, Georgia had more places off limits to carrying a gun than any state in the nation.
Wow.
And that includes, by the way, California. If you go to my Atlanta Gun Rights Examiner column, I've got 2 articles, one from early on and one updated that list side by side the California laws and the Georgia laws on carry. Unfortunately, we actually still have more places off limits to carrying than California does today.
But one of the ways that we have been able to open up those places is when the bedwetters start saying, this is going to happen, everybody's going to be shot, there's going to be blood in the streets and all that, is we remind them that the only people that are going to be allowed to do this are the people that have that Georgia weapons license, used to be Georgia firearms license, who have been background checked by the FBI, the GBI, and had mental health background checks run on them, and they are the safest people in this country. And I do believe, and you may differ with me, but I believe that we would have never gotten to the point we are today if we didn't have a license. I'm all for doing away with it, but I'm not for doing away with it until we get everything we want.
What's the advantage of doing away with it?
$7 a year. $7 a year, and you don't have to ask permission
All right,
from
so
the government.
say you have open constitutional carry. The advantage of having a license and being checked is I know everybody in here has been checked.
Well,
I feel comfortable. Anybody can walk with a gun if you.
and that is why we have been able to be successful. But there's an awful lot of people who, and I don't like it either. I don't like to have to go to the government and say, can I have permission to carry a gun to protect myself? Which is basically what you're doing. And then you have to pay them after they say yes. Well, actually, you have to pay them whether they say yes or no. Yes.
I just want to make sure the message isn't lost. Georgia Carry supports and has always supported and will continue to support permitless carry. I think the permit's an infringement, and I think the whole board of directors would share that view. But I just don't want to get lost in becoming one of these groups, and y'all have seen them because we've got them right here in Georgia, that go out there and just rattle cages and say, we demand this, that, or the other thing, and they get absolutely nothing. And if your goal is permitless carry, then I would say to shoot for, aim small, miss small, you've heard that term. Shoot for openly carried pistols without a license, which should be an easy target. We're in a state where a 14-year-old can carry an AK-47 down the street openly without violating any laws whatsoever. But a 65-year-old man who served in the military and is a former police officer needs a license to carry a pistol openly. That just makes no sense at all. So it's low-hanging fruit. But if you can't get that, put your energy there before trying to put it in something that's really, at this time in Georgia, politically out of reach.
And there is a bill, 543, House Bill 543, which would allow the Georgia weapons license to be optional. Your choice if you want them or not. The only thing is, what you just pointed out about the 14-year-old, if you read through the bill, you have to be 21 to carry a long gun in Georgia if that bill were to pass.
Oh, if that bill.
If that bill were to pass.
Now, can you have a long gun?
No, in
Buy a long
Georgia,
gun. You can have one earlier than
that's
that.
federal law for purchase. There's
Excuse me.
no law in Georgia relating to age for carrying a long gun. You can be a child and carry a long gun.
You just can't buy one until you're 18.
No license required whatsoever.
Like, yes, sir.
And I want to take a minute and pat you two guys on the back, because before I joined this group and met you guys and spent a lot of time arguing with different people on Georgia packing, I was of the mindset of Georgia gun owners. Not literally, but we need to go down to the Capitol and we just need to kick somebody's ass. And that's how we're going to get this done. And if they don't like it, we're going to call them bastards. And that came from a grotesque ignorance of the political process. And since I've joined this group and sat and watched what you guys have done and listened to what you guys have said, no, Philip, we need to do baby steps. Look, this is what's been successful, and we're going to keep doing that. And you look at what you guys have done, literally your eyes come open, and you go, you know what? I was out there on the baseball field with a football. And so I just want to pat you guys on the back. At least for one person, I can tell you, you've opened my eyes, and I'm now behind you guys in a much more rational approach.
Well, the only reason I feel that way is because of him.
It's all your fault.
Well, no, when I joined Georgia Carry, I'd give you a real quick intro how I joined Georgia Carry. I was walking across the living room one night at home in early 2008, and I heard the news. My wife was watching local news, which I rarely ever watch, and I heard them say a local legislator was introducing a gun bill to do away with his archaic gun law. And I went back, and it was Tim Bearden. Tim Bearden was our first legislator of the year. And I listened to what he had to say, and I wrote him an email that night, sent him an email, said, I'm for your bill, I'd just like to know what's in it. Next morning I got an email from Tim Bearden that said, go see these guys, GeorgiaCarry.org. They have all the information. Well, me being ignorant about the political process, I thought that the representatives and the senators wrote all these bills. And I think, what kind of guy is this? And I clicked on Georgia Carry. I live in Fayetteville, and the address was Fayetteville. And I started reading it. And I read about 2 minutes, and I said, where in the world did these guys come from? And I read for another 5 minutes, and I not only joined Georgia Carry, I printed out about 15 applications to take around to my customers. And when I walked in, I'd say, here, you need to join this. These guys are trying to make a difference here. And so I got involved from that and listened or reading Ed's emails. One of the things that he always said is the same thing that you see in almost every one of our emails when it comes time to contact the legislators. Treat them with respect. They have a job to do. And if you don't, even if they don't agree with you, there may be a time when they will agree with you, even on something else. Maybe it won't be on gun bills. But there will be a time when they will help you, probably, because people will vote for their friends before they'll vote yes. And it has worked, and as such, Georgia Carry has an awful lot of respect down at the Capitol right now. Yes, ma'am.
What does this do for me?
That Georgia weapons license, that allows you to carry your firearm openly or concealed anywhere that is not off limits in the state of Georgia, which there are 7, 8 places. You can't carry into,
Hospital.
no, you can, unless it's a mental hospital that's run by the state,
Well,
You
you
can
can't
carry
carry,
it.
Fayette
Well-
Community has a sign.
Well, they have a sign,
They have a
but,
sign.
but that sign is not against the law.
Okay.
That is private property. Any private property that has signs, you can't make a law just by putting up a sign on your private property and say you can't do this. However, it is their private property, and if they see you and ask you to leave, then if you don't leave, they could have you arrested for criminal trespass, which is, can be up to $1,000 fine and/or a year in jail.
But they're not entitled to search your purse if
Right.
they, or anything like that.
Right. Now, if you work there, then they could fire you in violation of their rules, but they cannot take you to jail unless you refuse to leave when they tell you to.
Right, but go back to the places that you were gonna say.
Courthouses?
Courthouses, prisons, jails, government buildings that have screening
The post-certified officer.
with a post-certified officer. You can't carry in state-run mental institutions, you can't carry in a nuclear power plant. You can't, we say you can, but you get arrested if you carry to schools.
That's a whole other.
Churches, well, that's federal property. Any federal property, you need to stay out of it.
Well, unless it's
Churches,
a
So if I go in and
national
check my
park or
mail,
something.
well, except for national park, except for
Forest
national
Service.
parks or national parks.
So if I go in and check my mail, I can't carry inside?
Not legally.
Not even in the parking lot.
Can't even have it in the
Well, that's-
So if I want to check my mail, I can't.
There's some debate about that. I carry
carry
at the post office, and I think it's legal, but you're risking
I'm
arrest.
not going to.
Where's your place? Which place?
Post office.
And you can't carry into a church that has not given you permission to carry into.
If the church has a sign, no firearms, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, they don't have to put up a sign. If they have not given express permission to Georgia weapons license holders to carry in the church, you can't
How would
carry
you
in the
know
church.
that?
It has to come
You
from,
have
it
to
The
has
law
to come
doesn't
from the
say.
pastor and the board
Has
of
to come
directors.
from the person
Once you
in
ask the
charge.
pastor that, he knows you're paranoid.
Higher up.
Well, it depends on the church. Not all churches have that model of a pastor
We
who's
have
one
a-
person.
we had the,
It's whatever's in the
The
law.
board.
The law says the governing
he
body.
told us we can't carry in church.
Most churches can't pass those in government.
Yeah.
You know, he's up
Yeah.
over a certain area.
Oh, you mean if the local parish wanted to carry, they couldn't? No.
But
No,
the church is-
like, for example, with Archdiocese, I'm a ordained minister with the Catholic Church. The Archdiocese of Atlanta, the Archbishop has said that he doesn't want people carrying. He said law enforcement can, but since he's the governing authority of this entire, different churches are designed different ways. If you're at, a Baptist church down the street, they're their own authority.
Right.
So it just depends on what,
Well,
I think like the Episcopal Church and some of the others have a governing, a bishop or things like that, so.
But it's the only,
Church, you go all the way to this, federal level.
yeah.
it's the only misdemeanor in the entire Georgia code.
It's $100,
however,
yeah.
that has a different penalty, and that is, A, it's a non-arrestable offense. It says it right in the statute, and it's a $100 fine.
Up to
And it doesn't count against your weapons carry license.
It can.
That's,
I believe it, that's
that
debatable, I
is
think it
an open
is.
question, and I would conclude that it probably.
Because you are
can.
carrying in
Oh,
an
really?
off-limits place, because if you look at the off-limits locations, it's
No,
those
really?
churches. And then there's an exemption down, or maybe, no, they
Now,
changed it,
schools,
they said churches.
I don't think schools are included, but the church is probably right.
The,
Have to
the,
look at 149.
It is.
At any rate, that's one of the things that we want to try to change this year, is churches are private property, they should be treated as such.
Yes.
Prior to 2014, you couldn't even have a gun in the parking lot without a license. Prior to 2010, you couldn't have one within 200 yards of the parking lot. But now you can have them if the church allows it. We want the churches to be treated as private property, because that's what they are. The government should not be in it. And if they don't want you to carry, that's fine. They tell you to leave and you have to leave. It's the same thing. But as Ed pointed out, it's the only piece of private property in the state of Georgia that you can be fined for stepping on it with a firearm without somebody's permission. Now, we also would like to see campus carry. As I said, we think we've got it. We've talked about that before. through HB 826 and our ongoing lawsuit. But there will probably be a campus carry bill this year. Whether it gets passed or not, we don't know, but there's a couple of ways we're going to attack it. One is through a bill that just says campus carry. Yeah.
So if you walk in a place that happens to have some sort of a metal detector as you go in the door, and it goes off, and somebody stops you and says, "Are you carrying a weapon?"
Where are you? Are you on private property?
Yeah, let's say you're
a
at
government
Kroger,
building?
or you're at Kroger, or you're at, I mean, Kroger's had some shootings lately, so who knows?
That's a bad neighborhood, I'd find another place to shop.
You have to go through security to pay your money.
Well, no, I mean, but just in case they have something that alerts some metal coming in the door, and somebody stops you and says, "Weapon," as long as you got your Georgia carry license with you, you're okay.
No, not in private property. That's why I said it. Are we in a government building or are we in a private property
Well-
building? If you're in a government building, that's true. If they are supervised by a post-certified officer, when you walk through there, if it goes off and they say you can't come in here with a firearm, then you show them your license and you leave
Right,
and go get rid of it.
right,
If you walk into private property,
like Kroger.
like Kroger or anybody, private property,
Right.
and you walk through a screening device and they say you can't come in here, then that's just like them seeing you with a gun and saying you can't come in here. The screening just told them you had one. But you can't show a license, say, yes, I've got one, I can come on here. It's private property, it's their right.
One way to
Like,
look at it
I can't
is-
walk over your private property and do what I want to do without your permission.
That's all I was gonna say, Jerry, yeah, just think about it like your own house. It's
Yep.
your decision whether to let people bring a gun in.
Right.
But it's not a arrestable offense.
No.
If
No.
they- if
Well,
they-
unless you
Not-
refuse to leave.
Right, yeah, but.
Why wouldn't Kroger have a sign up?
Unless you want
And, well, signs don't mean anything
Sign doesn't
either.
make any difference.
Just beating on Kroger here for a second. Kroger lets us
Yeah.
carry.
Yeah.
Kroger's a pro-carry place, they've
Yeah.
even
Go to Chili's.
sponsored, they've even given,
Go to-
for a while, they were a sponsor of GCO, I don't know whether they still are or
No,
not.
they're not.
The Justice Department over here has got the metal detector, and I had a knife in my pocket.
Yeah.
They would not let me go in. I had to take it.
Well, that's right.
I had to take it back to the truck
That's
and
correct.
drop it off. They didn't even have a box that I could just
No.
put it in
No,
and
that's
come
correct.
pick it up when I come out.
And that's what he said, basically.
Yeah.
Just because you have the license, that doesn't mean you get to go in there. That just means that you're not gonna be arrested for trying to.
Now, if you go to the courthouse and you have a weapons carry license, they'll let you leave and you can take it to the car or whatever else.
Yeah.
If you don't have a weapons carry license, you can be arrested.
Yeah.
For a pocket knife.
It's called the right of retreat.
Right.
Well, be careful here on what we're discussing, hold on. There's two different things. Government buildings and courthouses are not in the same subsection.
That's correct.
So courthouses are their own. There is no warning required to be
Right.
given, there is
You're
no
exactly
screening
right.
required in a courthouse. There is no requirement that the courthouse have a sign outside saying, this is a courthouse. I don't know how many of you have gone into a town, for example, in my town, Sonoya, you go to the Sonoya Police Department, it's a courthouse. They have a courthouse in there. You go into the city hall, it's not a courthouse, they don't have a courthouse, but 7, 8 years ago they did. How would you know? You don't. There's no sign out front that tells you that. There's no screening required. The courthouse is off limits. You carry your gun in there and somebody becomes aware of it and they dogpile you at the entrance and put the handcuffs on. Judge will say that's just fine. You shouldn't have carried it in here. It's a courthouse.
Right.
Now, I will tell you that if you're in some of the more reasonable locations, for example, in Sonoya, in fact, the chief has told me they don't regulate carry unless it's in the courthouse portion. And they just don't want people going in there with it. So he doesn't care if you come into the police department with it. But technically, under the law, any building that contains a courtroom is a courthouse, and therefore the police department in Sonoya is off limits as a courthouse, and it doesn't matter whether there's screening or not.
Ed, would it be to our advantage to change that law to read courtroom instead of courthouse?
That's one of the things that we're going to work on next year, whether we get it done or not.
We even tried to limit it just to state and superior courts, so it'd be the standard courthouse you think about when you go to a court, the superior court of whichever county. You don't always know what building that is. You don't always know where some recorder's court or a municipal court or some workers' comp administrative law judge is in a building. But judges scream bloody murder about that. We did try to have courthouses be the same as government buildings, which means They would have the same screening, you'd have the same opportunity if you don't clear screening to leave. But there were judges, Superior Court judges, who were screaming bloody murder about that to legislators, and legislators will jump when a judge starts talking. Their question was, well, we don't have screening. And you know, my response, if I were a legislature, would have been, well, what the hell makes you think people aren't carrying guns in there right now? But they just wanted the ability to keep it illegal.
And the legislators are kind of, the legislators are kind of wimpy when it comes to going up against the judge, because an awful lot of them are attorneys.
Or the Board of Regents.
And you don't, and the Board of Regents, but an awful lot of the rest, the representatives and senators are attorneys, and you don't really want to torque off the guy before you go in and try his case.
Are they all fair?
Well,
And I know as a group, we've been against signage for a long time, and I understand why we're against signage. Have we considered any type of legislation to say that you cannot be arrested for violating boundaries that you cannot reasonably ascertain are boundaries? For example, if there's a recorder's court in the back of the maintenance warehouse, you can't be arrested for stepping foot on the property when it is impossible for you to determine you were violating the law.
well, that's one of the reasons that we use for campus carry. You can't tell where
Boundaries,
you're on
yeah.
campus. You never know when you're on campus.
Exactly.
Have we attacked that issue itself? No, not that I know of. We might have earlier, but I don't think we did. But again, like I said, we'll discuss that.
Does the state of Georgia have reciprocal license for those?
Oh, no, everybody except South Carolina.
So if you're in Florida and you got your gun, you got your Georgia weapons, you're okay.
You're okay as long as you follow their laws.
That's right.
They don't have open carry.
You carry openly in Florida.
Let me comment on that, because I am from Florida originally, and been here for 60 years, but anyway, I still have relatives down there, and I asked a police officer one day that I knew, and he told me even a police officer, off duty, out of uniform, cannot carry open.
Right.
The only time you can carry open in Florida is if you're hunting, you can carry a sidearm in the woods, and you're open. That's the only
Well,
time you can carry.
I have heard stories of people driving down the road in a smaller car and having their firearm laid on their console where you can see it and the police see it when they're driving by and pull them over and stop them because it wasn't concealed, even in the car.
That's
And
correct.
if you don't have a license in Florida, you can carry in your car because it's an extension of your home. But there's a two-step process. It must be holstered or in a locked compartment. If it's in your console that's not locked, that's one step to open it. Second step is pulling out the holster.
Well, fortunately,
If it's in your glove compartment, unholstered, you got to unlock it, that's
Right.
one step.
fortunately in Georgia, we got rid of those
Yeah.
rules
Amen.
way back. Actually, before Georgia carry started, it was against the law for you to carry in a car concealed unless you had a license.
Except the glove box or center console.
Correct.
And in Alabama, it's still unlawful without a
You
license.
had, and one of the reasons we got, one thing that helped that is if you're driving down the road, if you drive your car all the time and you keep a pistol in the seat, your wife gets in and she doesn't have a license, she gets out and they find the gun, she's in trouble. So we stopped that garbage. And then, like I said, we want to get rid of the opt-out provision of churches, just make it private property. One of the problems that we've had trouble with in HB 60 is public or private property. In HB 60, we inserted into the code section that said that that a leasee of private property can prohibit you from carrying guns, but a leasee of public property can't. We've had to fight that a couple of times. One at the Botanical Gardens, we're still fighting, and we're also fighting at the air show up in Rome. And so we are going to see about putting in a definition of what private and public property is so that people will know what it is and maybe we won't have to spend so much time in court. And also arising out of the court, or out of the court case of the airport, the people that run the airport called it a commercial airport because they sell coffee, Cokes, and peanuts. So we're gonna put the definition of airport in there. We talked about courts. One of the things that we're talking about is trying to change the time frame for probate courts to issue GWLs. Right now it's 45 days, but I think 30 of that days is for the background check. Well, the background check no longer takes 30 days. It's normally over within a day or so because everything's done by fingerprint. So we're going to try to shorten up that time for people who apply for a new license, and those returning won't have to wait quite so long. And we're also looking into the statute that the city of Atlanta is now violating by not selling those guns that are confiscated and are no longer of value to their court cases. They, depending on who you want to listen to, they told Channel 46 they had 10,000 guns. They told Jim Galloway they had 6,000, and now they're saying somewhere between 5 and somewhere else that they have that are supposed to be auctioned off. According to the state statute, they're supposed to hold an auction every 6 months to get rid of those firearms, and they are not doing it, and they say they won't do it, and we are probably going to sue them over that. We've talked about, wrote it up, instituting a grace period for persons that move to Georgia from a reciprocal state. Right now, when you come to Georgia, when you get your driver's license, whatever firearms license you had, it's no longer valid in Georgia. It's valid where you came from, but not in Georgia. And so if you get a driver, if last week or last year you came from Texas or Florida up here every week, you were legal to carry. But if you move up here and establish residence, you're no longer trusted to carry. So we're trying to figure out some way to get them a temporary license when they get their driver's license and apply for a GWL so that they can carry until that gets here. That's not a big deal, but if you just moved here, I get a lot of calls on that. We want to change the definition of a firearm in the code section that has to do with a felon in possession to be consistent with the federal law. Right now, by federal law, a felon can have muzzle loaders and antique firearms, but you can't in Georgia. So our law is tougher than the federal laws. We want to try to make a match. And just a couple other items. That's basically it. We've talked about a couple other things that we're not sure they're going to go anywhere, so we're not going to discuss them at this point. But we are working daily to try to figure out how to get a few more of our, well, all of our rights back here in the state of Georgia to carry where we want to make the Second Amendment mean what it says. Any questions?
Short of sending emails, calling your representatives, what do you need of us?
Well, right now, we need you, as we say in most of the email updates, we need you to be on a first-name basis with your representative and senator. We need them to know who you are and them to know where you stand. And when we email you and say there's a hearing on a bill, we would like for you to attend if at all possible. The ladies in particular, the ladies seem to have a much better reception than the old gray-haired guys. I'm no longer a gray-haired guy. But the only problem is we don't normally know until sometimes the afternoon before that we're going to have one. So getting the message out to you, and then when you're working, you have to take off work, things of that nature, it's very difficult to get down there. But if you can make those hearings, and when we ask you to email and contact your senators and representatives, if you do that, then that's the best thing we can do.
Can you send us that, who those are? I'm new to the area, so I don't know.
You can go on the Georgia Secretary of State website and you can put in your name and your birth date, where you live, et cetera. And if you haven't registered to vote, you can register there. And if you have registered, it will tell you, okay, it will tell you who you're being part of. Contact information. Okay. Yes, sir.
The first point here, though, backs up the second point. Call or email or write or talk to them. It makes a huge difference when an email pops up if this person knows who you are. They're going to get 500 emails that day. You've had days where you get a bunch of junk in your email inbox, but if you get it from a friend, somebody you know, who's asking you to look at something, don't you pay more attention to that than the spam from the local store or whatever? So it's important to meet your legislators, and now it's a little rough with Christmas, but for those of you who haven't, I encourage you to go and meet your representative and your senator in person. Take them to lunch. Make a new friend. They'll remember that. You'd be shocked how many people never do that. I remember back when GCO was relatively new, it was, say her name now, it was Charlize Bird, was that right?
Yes.
She said, our webmaster and one of the board members is married to Rebecca Knighton, who went and had coffee with her in the morning, and she told her, nobody in the entire time I've been in the legislature has ever done this. And you're going to tell me that doesn't make an impression? I'll tell you the impression it made in that case. She became, the representative became a GCO member, and she became somebody who was a supporter of what we did and a member of our organization, just from that one meeting for coffee. So, you know, you might think, what difference can I make? But you make a lot more difference as somebody that the representative knows and is friendly with if you go make a friend than you do just sending an email as a stranger.
That's correct. And you can, well, I agree with what he says. Now, if you go back to last, I believe it was last session, if you were members back then, you got an email one day that said that we were opposed to House Bill 186. Anybody remember that?
I do.
We were opposed to House Bill 186. 186 was a portion of a bill that was passed the year before, HB 826, which the governor said doesn't apply to anybody anymore. And so they took a section of that bill to try to correct the zero tolerance policy of the school districts. They just copied it out, put it in the bill, and said, here. But John Monroe and I went down to the public safety hearing that day. When they had it, and we started looking at it, and it created the crime of a teacher couldn't carry her kid to school and drop them off if she had a firearm in her car, whether she had a license or not. And there was another restriction that we didn't like. I don't remember the details of that. But John and I left the hearing, and we decided, walking to our car, we always try to park in the same parking lot because we get to walk a couple blocks to the car, that we were going to oppose the bill. We came home, this was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We came home, I put out the email that said we're opposed to it. Call the members of the Public Safety, House Public Safety, Homeland Security Commission, and tell them you're opposed. These are the authors of the bill. George Carey had sent them an email. And the next day during the hearing, Alan Powell, who's the committee chairman, said that he would like to, before we start, he said, I'd like to thank all my Second Amendment friends for reminding us that every once in a while we step out of bounds. Now, you tell me.
They tried, but it didn't work.
Yep. and they will listen to you, you know. I mean, if they call me and say how you think Georgia Carey's going to feel about it, I'll tell them, and if it's bad, normally they try to figure out how to make it good. But when y'all all call them and email them, they listen.
And we packed the room for that committee hearing the next day.
We did. And another thing that's kind of fun, when you go down to a hearing at the House Public Safety Committee, is an awful lot of times the chairman will say, who on the committee is a member of Georgia Carey? I think there's about 13 or 14 members on there, and I will assure you that there's 8 or 10 of them that are members of Georgia Carey that hold up their hands. Some of them are wearing guns, a lot of them. So your input is is essential to keep us headed in that direction.
Very good.
And back to what I learned from Ed earlier. Georgia Carry emails, not Georgia gun owners emails. Don't send them an email telling them what a piece of crap they are if they don't vote for this.
You make it short, concise. I am for this bill. This is why I'm for this bill. You don't have to tell, they're not your long lost uncle. They don't have to know what's happened in the last 2 months, why you're for this bill, you'd like to see it passed. And that's basically all you need to say.
If you guys are on Facebook, consider friending your representatives, and throughout the year,
yeah.
like the pictures of their kids and their chorus
Yeah.
concert. Like Ed said, I mean, you can befriend somebody in more ways than one these days, and don't be afraid to reach out. I have a number of representatives locally that I met over Facebook, and we were discussing issues simply because the relationship started there.
Well, I know a lot of people think it's kind of a scary thing for them to walk up and try to talk to their elected official because they're an elected official, but they put on their pants just like we do. They are people who are out doing their regular job as well as trying to do something for the good of the community area. So treat them with that respect and everything will be fine. Has been so far. And of course, right now, there are no real bills to report on, but as soon as any go in, we will let you know.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
General question. I've wondered for years, when I carried, it was a good idea to wear a lanyard with a concealed carry.
I don't think it is, but it's up to you. I mean, I carry mine right here, so there's not much choice, or not much doubt that I got one. And most of the time, you'll find that if somebody's openly carrying, they're legal. They're not gonna walk around let the cop know it. If they're up to no good, they're going to have it hid and let you see it when they get ready to see it.
Although, just to be clear, we finally got it written into the statute that they couldn't detain you
Right.
on the basis of a firearm, just to
That's
check
right.
and see if you had a license.
Yes, sir.
I have a question on the training. I'm a retired police officer from New York City. I just wondered about the training part. We were never taught to shoot for the head. We were always taught to shoot for the body mass. And that's the only problem I have with what they're talking about today, because that was, they told us then, I mean, to do something like that is very unusual that you'd even have a chance of hitting anybody.
Correct.
We always trained to shoot the body mass. So I don't know what that comes into your.
A lot of that's changed with the military too. With the use of body armor, they train to shoot for the hips, or for the head, or from the neck up, because people are wearing body armor. And, you know, granted, they're not running around with a lot of plates on and things like that. But with these active shooters, when you see them wearing some tight gear, if they're wearing a vest, if you see them wearing a vest or something, most likely you're not going to be able to do anything with a concealed weapon.
All right, but you gotta understand something.
Yes, sir.
90% of felons out in the street are not gonna run into harm.
Sure.
I'm just talking about the everyday crook.
I agree.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in the,
Mozambique drill is the solution for that.
right,
Is 2 to the
Failure
chest,
drill.
quick reassessment, and 1 to the head if necessary.
yeah.
Failure.
But in
In
this,
my experience, that's what happened.
right, in the scenario I was discussing, basically, they were saying that in the article because you're underpowered and you have a long-range shot with an underpowered handgun. That's what they were saying. To stop somebody with a rifle, then you need to stop them quick because you may have, 5 to 12 to 15 rounds max. That's why they were talking about headshots at that point.
Okay.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, financially, how does GCO stand right now? Do we need to do something? Is membership drive adequate to support our efforts?
I think you need to take up a collection for the executive director.
Can I answer that? GCO meets its expenses and a little more each year and has been growing. But one of the things that we decided early on was we weren't going to pester people for money all the time.
Right.
With that having been said, most people aren't even aware that there's GCO, which most of us are referring to as GeorgiaCarry.org Inc. It's a 501c4, which means it's a nonprofit. There's also GCO Foundation. GCO Foundation is a 501c3, which is a charity. You can actually have a tax deduction for donating money to it. And we would probably advertise that more, but we just didn't want to violate our pestering people for money bit. Basically, the 501c3, the charitable arm of Georgia Carry, is used for just about everything except lobbying, because lobbying is outside of what a 501c3 can do. So the education efforts, litigation efforts are funded by the 501c3, which is GCO Foundation, and then legislative sorts of efforts are funded by the 501c4, which is GeorgiaCarry.org, Inc. And that's the same way most groups that you know of that work in like a civil rights sort of arena function, like the ACLU. People just refer to it as the ACLU or the NRA. They have 501c4s and 501c3s that do various things. Donations to either one of those are always welcome. They don't get wasted. We don't have a bunch of people on the payroll or anything like that. The efforts go directly into the fight. We do pay lobbyists. Believe me, that buys us a lot of traction and respect down there. But we don't have board members and such personally benefiting from Georgia Carry, and we never have.
That's one of the reasons that we have the raffles, is we have about 5 or 6 raffles a year. And we always try to get some neat firearm that's either one of a kind or one that definitely looks like a different one of a kind to raffle off. That way we put it out there. If you want to join, you can. If you don't have to. It's up to you. But we've awarded some pretty neat firearms in the last 3 or 4 years. Our first raffle, I might point out, most of you may not know about it, but our first one was a Henry rifle that we got through Ben Autrey here. It was a Henry Big Boy, 357, and we had the logo cut on the receiver with a CNC machine, and the serial number of that rifle was GCO 001. So we try to look for different things. We don't want it to be the same pistol every time. We want it to be different pistols, different firearms, etc. And most of those firearms, such as the Daniels Defense that we just got through raffling off, those are donated by our sponsors. So basically all the money goes to us. And that's why we do it online, is because we don't have any other expenses. All it is I have to notify everybody what their numbers are. But there's no additional expenses by buying tickets or mailing or any of the other things. So.
Not everybody has a bunch of money to donate either, and
Right.
There's a lot of other things you could do, like Mr. Martin was suggesting, if everybody signed up one person, we'd double our membership numbers. I can tell you right now, I run into people carrying pistols openly in a holster in public all the time who've never even heard of Georgia Carry. And more money would get us able to reach those people. Some of you heard we were advertising on WSB. Could you imagine if we could have billboards and radio and, we try to get all the free coverage we can with news, but the fact is most Georgia license holders have never even heard of Georgia Carry. There are 650,000 of them in this state, and we have just an extremely tiny percentage of them as members. I don't see any reason why we don't have the whole 650,000.
Speaking of that number, the director of GBI this week said that since 2010, they had run 711,000 background checks. He said, I don't know how many of them passed, how many of them flunked, but I doubt seriously there's 100,000 of them that didn't, that did flunk. I still say, along with Mike Minkus, we think there's more like 700 to 750,000 licensed in Georgia right now. But we don't know, and that's a good thing. We don't know because there's no database in the state of Georgia that has everybody's license in it.
Well, the Georgia Administrative Office of the courts, though, has the probate judges track how many they
have them tracked, but as far as finding out because they just don't have one, I can't do it.
No, but you can add up each county and.
That's
decide
correct.
where they are.
That part's correct, but nobody's gonna be able to do like they did in New York and publish a list of Georgia weapons holders. Yes.
Well, what's kind of unsettling is that somebody sent out a thing on the sheriff in Florida,
Yes.
and other law enforcement officers have come out with similar statements. And a lot of, especially in Texas, they're including people with carry licenses and hunters as part of their self-defense for the state when they're talking about homeland security. It's really it's a surprising thing that we have to be talking about numbers of those people to protect our country in today's times.
I don't disagree with you, but we're the ones that are local to the problem more so.
I don't think it's scary at all. That's for the best, most of the history of this
That's
country.
right.
That's
That's
how
what,
weapons were
that's
taken
what
care
did
of.
it.
We say, isn't that the plan?
Was the old gray-headed man.
Catch me before 10.